Hello, I'm Dr. Cyril Orji, a Nigerian American resident in the United States. I was a college professor for many years, but later I transitioned to industry where I retired as a research scientist. I have a PhD in computer science. Recently, I wrote a book, First is Last, which is a fictional recollection of my experiences during the Nigeria Civil War. I was a student at Government Comprehensive Secondary School, Port Harcourt at that time. I didn't fight in the war, so this book is not about what happened at the various war theaters. Rather, it is my recollection of how my family survived the war. It tells the story of how, after the fall of Enugu, where we lived, we moved from one refugee camp to another seeking shelter. Our life continued that way until my father caught kwashiorkor, that dreadful disease that arises from malnutrition. We almost lost him at that point in the war, but it forced us to return behind enemy lines very close to Enugu, and that was where we stayed until the war ended. This book isn't about what was right or wrong about the war. I was just a high school student. I didn't keep any notes. It is simply how best I can remember my life during those 30 months. So I hope it can be worth your while to hear my story. The book is available on Amazon, and the link to it is at the description page of this video. So what this video is about the political situation in Nigeria. It isn't about my book. First, I'll briefly touch on the hunger protests currently going on in the country. As I do this video, the country is really in a mess. People are protesting, saying they are hungry. I will touch on that. And as a solution to our problems, I will then make the case for restructuring Nigeria into a federation of 6 regions. Something unprecedented is happening in Nigeria as I make this video. People are begging for food and protesting. This is unprecedented. The last time I saw people lining up for food rations was over half a century ago during the Civil War. In any event, my purpose here is not to discuss the hunger or the protests in any detail. Rather, I will briefly point out the irony on how different parts of the country are reacting to this emergency. So, but even before the current hunger protests started, the northern elites seem to have made up their minds to go to war against President Tinubu. Recently, an Arewa leader was on Channels TV to condemn the move on some branches of the central bank and aviation being moved to Lagos. What was very interesting about this situation was that the same Arewa leader was defending the concentration of Nigeria's military in Kaduna, claiming it will be easy to fan out capabilities from Kaduna instead of Lagos or Calabar. Well, I will return to this concentration of Nigeria's military in Kaduna in my next video. But this is gaslighting at its worst. This particular Arewa leader even went as far as to say that Buhari spent time developing the Niger Bridge. I mean, this psychological manipulation to force us to question our memory or sanity is at the least irritating. Recently, all northern leaders have called on all Nigerians to join in protests against the Tinubu administration. Even the Sultan of Sokoto has weighed in. In fact, he invited the First Lady to hand her over the message for her to deliver directly to her husband. He was claiming that he could no longer contain the youths in his kingdom. My goodness, where were all these northern elites and leaders during the 8 years of Buhari? Where were they during the SARS protests? Moreover, this is not really for only the northern elders of traditional rulers. Even the Fulani elites have joined in. Many of you may be familiar with Professor Osman Yusuf. He was the former executive secretary of the Nigerian Health Insurance Scheme. And he's a regular on TV, whenever it suits his purpose, as in this particular case where he came lamenting that the Southeast was uncharacteristically quiet. The same gaslighting. I believe that Professor Yusuf and other Fulani elites have been properly answered. They've been told why the Igbo will not join them in their protests. So I won't waste time here repeating or regurgitating the same reasons. Instead, I really want to, in the few seconds, directly make an appeal to my Igbo compatriots, asking them to lay low. In my opinion, there's no need for the beer parties that seem like gloating. No, we can't be gloating. Everyone is in pain. Even the Igbo, we are suffering. So everybody knows what got us here. We know that Peter Obi won the election, but his mandate was stolen. But equally important is the need to realize that Igbo votes alone cannot win an election in Nigeria. So let us be sensitive to the feelings of non-Igbo who voted for Peter Obi and are probably participating in the protests. So everybody understands the peculiar situation of the Igbo, because once we join the protest, we become the scapegoat. The DSS will descend upon us. So we know that. So we will not join them. What is also interesting is that, given the insecurity and, all the problems in the country, some people are advocating that a military coup should be the solution. I think it was ex-leader Babangida who first broached that, warning Tinubu, hey, the military, they are watching you. Calling on the military or calling for a military coup is insane. That means going back to something like 1983, when Buhari overthrew President Shagari. Those of us old enough will know that there was nothing wrong with the Shagari administration, except that Buhari saw that an Igbo man, Vice President Ekwueme, was likely to succeed Shagari, and Buhari, for whatever he has with the Igbo, he couldn't stand that, so he overthrew Shagari. So if there is a coup again, we will go back to something like that period, because after that coup, governing Nigeria became a relay race with Fulani generals in a team handing the baton from one general to another. Think about it. Buhari ran his lap, handed over the baton to Babangida. Babangida ran his lap, handed over the baton to Abacha. Abacha did his thing and handed over to Abubakar. So no, we cannot go back to that time. And the truth, moreover, is that it is only the Fulani that can execute a military coup in Nigeria today. All the military assets are in the north. And if there is a coup, who becomes head of state? A Fulani. So please, no coup. Let's continue looking for a non-military solution to our problems. So, given the challenges in our political system as a non-military solution to our problems, I came up with a rotational model that I proposed a couple of months ago. There's a video describing the rotational model. This is out there on YouTube, and there is a pointer to that video at the description page of this video. So if you go to the description page of this video, you will see a pointer to the rotational model. So I will not really waste time describing it here again. But essentially, it is a model that is based on our 6 geopolitical zones. It says, let the presidency be for a single term and let it rotate through the 6 zones. It says, let us get all the key posts in a country, divide them into 6 fixed buckets, and let those buckets rotate through the 6 states. So basically all it is saying, it says, we don't want this winner takes it all mentality, because that's really what is killing us. The presidency in Nigeria today is like a dictator. Remember that the 1999 constitution was just forced on Nigerians by all these military dictators who immediately put out their khaki and put on agbada, and they all became Democrats overnight. Who can deceive himself that Buhari is a Democrat. No, he's a dictator. So this is all the rotational model is saying. Throw away those things, but let's get power, divide them, and let it go through so that everybody becomes part of governing, so we don't really leave some people. People have reviewed my model. I never claimed it was a perfect model. I just called it a starting point. It is, if you think it's not good enough, show me where it is not good. And some people really have. They came up with three, strong criticism to the model. First, they said it doesn't allow for ownership of resources. It doesn't allow the ability for each zone to develop at its pace. And it doesn't allow for each zone to provide its own internal security. As a solution, these critics argue that Nigeria must be restructured to the federalism of the 60s, 1960 and 63. I was really appreciative of the suggestions given, by these critics. So, but what I strongly feel is that Nigeria cannot return to the three regions of 1960 or 63. So for those of us old enough, we will realize that the creation of states was partly meant to give the minorities in the various regions some power and their independence. So returning to the three regions with power centered in Kaduna, Ibadan, and Enugu, with Lagos as it were at that time, will cause the minorities to lose power. Hence, it is a non-starter. Think about it. Is it conceivable that the people of the River State and the Efik people will like a union with an Igbo majority? That was the definition of Eastern region in 1960. What about the Plateau and Benue people still being slaughtered by the Fulani herdsmen? Do you think they will gladly return to an old northern Nigeria? Or even in Western region, the Delta people? So returning to the three regions is a non-starter, but having a federation is acceptable. That is probably a way to go. So if we agree on that, then the problem is, how do we partition the country to get the components of a federation? And I will call that the way forward, because currently Nigeria is in a dire state. The economy is in shambles. There is insecurity everywhere. So something bold needs to be done. Restructuring Nigeria into a federation is the right bold step. For the remainder of this video, I am going to make a case that Nigeria needs to be restructured into a federation of 6 regions. And I will show how it ties up with the rotational model. In part 2, which will be a different video, but it is actually a part 2 of the same reasoning, but I will release that as a separate video, I will discuss the restructuring in some details, and I will focus on some factors that will pose a challenge to the exercise. So what is federalism? It's just a system of government in which the power is divided between a central authority and various constituent units. So in the 60s, the central authority was in Lagos, and the constituent units, their bases were in Kaduna, Ibadan, and Enugu. So why I agree with that model, now I'm opposed to the 3 regions. So I propose a federation of 6 zones: North Central, Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, South-South, and Southwest. So if you prefer, you can rename the zones to regions, just so that it sounds familiar. North Central region, Northeast region, and so on and so on. Because after all, what is a region? It's just an area or division, part of a country, having definable characteristics. It is those definable characteristics that defined Eastern region, that defined Western region, that defined Northern region. A zone, an area having particular characteristics, and it is those characteristics that help define our 6 zones today. So if we all agree to go to federalism, we know that federalism has two key components: the units that make up the federalism and the division of power. So if you see the first one, the units, that problem has been solved. We have the 6 units, that is the 6 zones. So the issue then, the challenge is how to divide power and manage the resources. I argue that we need a system where every zone or every region will manage its resources, develop at its own pace, and police its people. That will really give us the competition we need for development. This idea of everybody wanting to be the minister of petroleum is really taking Nigeria back. Let each region manage its resources and we start competing, and there will be progress. And we will have internal policing. I'm not talking about any army. We'll have only one Nigerian army because there will be only one Nigeria. So that's my proposal. I think it is the way that this country can move forward. So the next point is, how do we tie in federalism and the rotational model? Well, federalism, we will still have that power at, the central authority, which used to be Lagos, now it will be Abuja. We are going to have a president or a prime minister. The important thing is that this president or prime minister, that post will have to rotate through the regions. Okay? After this region produces the president or the prime minister, it will go to the next region, it will go to the next region. And the process, the details of doing this, all described very well in my rotational video model. Similarly, we will get all the posts at that federal level, split them into 6 fixed buckets, and they will equally rotate. My rotational model will also apply to the regions. At the regional level, we will have a governor or a premier. That post will also rotate through the states in the region. Let's take the Southeast zone or Southeast region as an example. There you have Abia, Anambra, Ebonyi, Enugu, and Imo. The premier or the governor, that post will rotate through Abia, Anambra, Ebonyi, Enugu, and Imo. Similarly, all the posts at this regional level will be split into 5 buckets. This is very important because we don't want the problem we are solving at the federal level to be pushed to the regional level. Consider a situation where, say, Abia and Anambra, they gang up to dominate the rest, which is exactly what we have in Nigeria today, where the Southwest and the Northwest have ganged up, seem to have forgotten the rest of the country. And I just talked about 5 buckets. There's nothing sacrosanct about 5 buckets. It's just that there are 5 states in that zone or region. Think about the Northwest zone or Northwest region. They have 7 states there: Jigawa, Kaduna, Kano, Katsina, Kebbi, Sokoto, and Zamfara. The governor or the premier, that post will rotate through the 7 states. And then they will have all the posts at that regional level, split them into 7 buckets. So in my opinion, the rotational model should be fundamental to our governing dispensation, our governing philosophy going forward. At any level we are, we need to be thinking about how to get everybody involved. I mean, it's not even going to stop at the state level, because look, if you think about, it's not going to stop at the regional level, I wanted to say, it can go beyond, because if you look at what is happening in Imo State today, people always complain that the governor is coming from the Olu area. The Okigwe people will be complaining, the Owerri people, other parts, saying always Olu, Olu. And again, I'm sure that Nigerians are actually already practicing this in a way. So even they say, okay, the Edo South, Edo North, the candidate will come from Edo South, Edo North, and so on and so on. All we are really trying to do is to put it down in the Constitution, and it becomes the law, and everybody understands it and knows how to practice it. So sort of in wrapping up, Nigeria is in a dire state. And the government seems to be, not unclear how to tackle the problems. Palliatives will not solve the problem. It doesn't matter how many bags of rice we distribute. Even recently, there is a state that threw loaves of bread to Nigerians as if they were animals, and people were dying, struggling over a loaf of bread. Even during the war, the way rations were distributed was more orderly in a war situation. Nigerians aren't at war. It is a shame what is happening to Nigerians. I was just looking at the video of people struggling over loaves of bread. It's unfortunate. But regardless of the number of loaves of bread or bags of rice, those things will not solve the problem. And little tweaks in governance will not help either. We are at a point where we should stop deceiving ourselves. People telling us, okay, we need more states or we need more local government area. These are people who prefer the status quo. They are just telling us something to divert our attention. Moreover, throwing money to the states will not help. In fact, it's become so bad that in Nigeria, the president of the Senate will tell us that he had a rumor that money was given to the states. This is how bad the country has gotten. The president of the Senate, if I'm not mistaken, the third in line to the presidency. It's really, really very, very unfortunate. But be that as it may, even if the money was given, throwing money to the states will not solve the problem. The fundamental issue is, why are Nigerians unable to feed themselves? We used to export food. Why are Nigerians unable to live in their homes? Why have we become internally displaced persons in our various homes? Aren't these people who have become internally displaced, aren't many of them our farmers? So we don't need to be running around, going to Qatar, going to everywhere, begging for investors to come. No, that's not the problem. People need to return to their homes and feel secure in their homes. Then they will start farming. Then they will start producing food. Then we will stop importing items. The demand for the dollar will go down, and our currency will appreciate. This is not rocket science. And the people doing all these things, telling us, looking for investors or giving the states money, they understand this, but it's all distractions to confuse us. More importantly, we must dismantle that system and the constitution the military forced on us in 1999. Restructuring Nigeria into a federation is a right step to solving our problems. It's not a panacea. It's not the only solution, okay? It's not, but it is something we can do, and we'll be on the path to solving our problems. So, in this part one, what I have essentially done is to argue that we should restructure Nigeria, and I tied it to the rotational model. But I'm not naive. I'm not saying, oh, I've said it, it is done. No. It is actually in part two that I will discuss the problems I see going forward. I will discuss what I think are the factors that will pose a challenge to this restructuring exercise. But I will argue that it can be done. Thank you.